In the 1950s, a working farm fed a family, heated a house, and put meat on the table without sending a single job to town. Every task was done by hand with tools built for that one purpose. 15 of those tools have completely disappeared. Subscribe before we start. Number 15. Number 15, hay hook. A single curved steel hook about 8 inches long with a wooden handle. You drove it into a hay bale, got a grip, and dragged it wherever it needed to go. Load a wagon, stack a loft, pull a bale off a truck bed in January. Every farmer owned at least two, because hay doesn't move itself, and in the 1950s, neither did anything else on the farm. Hydraulic loaders and bale spears on tractor buckets replaced the hay hook and the arms that swung it. The tool weighed less than a pound. The work it did would break most men in an hour. Number 14, fence stretcher. A ratchet lever tool that grabbed barbed wire on one end and anchored to the post on the other. You pumped the lever, and the ratchet pulled the wire tight between posts, one click at a time. The wire had to be taut enough to stop a 1,200-pound bull without sagging and loose enough not to snap in cold weather when the metal contracted. A fence stretcher was the difference between a fence that held for 20 years and one that went slack by spring. Modern hydraulic tensioners do the same job, but the lever-style stretcher was the tool that fenced the American West. Number 13, corn knife. A heavy, broad-bladed knife about 18 inches long, shaped like a short machete with a thick spine for weight. Before mechanical corn pickers, a farmer walked the rows and cut the stalks by hand, one swing per stalk, all day long. The cut stalks were bundled into shocks and stood upright in the field to dry. The corn knife was the most physically demanding tool on the farm, and one of the first to disappear when the mechanical combine arrived. Most people who see one today think it's a weapon. It was, just not against people. Number 12, ice tongs. Heavy iron tongs with two curved prongs that closed on a block of ice when you lifted. Before electric refrigeration, farms stored ice cut from ponds and rivers in winter, packed in sawdust in an ice house, and used it through the summer. The tongs were the only way to move a 50-pound block of ice without dropping it, and every farm that had an ice house had a pair hanging next to the door. When household refrigerators reached rural America in the 1940s and 50s, the ice house closed. The tongs, the ice saw, and the entire practice of harvesting ice disappeared together. Number 11, butter churn. A tall wooden barrel or ceramic crock with a dasher, a wooden paddle on a stick that a person plunged up and down through the cream until the butter fat separated from the buttermilk. Every dairy farm churned butter by hand. The work was monotonous, repetitive, and usually assigned to the oldest child or the farmer's wife. A batch took 20 to 40 minutes of continuous churning, depending on the temperature of the cream. When creameries and commercial dairies scaled up after the war, farm families stopped churning and started buying butter like everyone else. The churn went from the kitchen to the barn, from the barn to the shed, and from the shed to an antique store. Number 10, scythe. A long curved blade mounted on a wooden handle called a snath, swung in a rhythmic arc close to the ground. Before tractor-drawn mowers, a farmer cut hay and grain with a scythe. He started before dawn, when the dew was still on the grass because wet stems cut cleaner than dry ones. The motion was a full-body rotation, hips leading the blade, arms following, the edge slicing through the stalks an inch above the soil. A good man with a sharp scythe could mow an acre in a day. The tractor mower could do it in 20 minutes. The scythe didn't survive the comparison. Number 9, crosscut saw. A 5 to 7 foot steel blade with handles on both ends, operated by two men standing on opposite sides of a log. One man pushed, the other pulled, alternating strokes. Every farm needed firewood, fence posts, and building timber, and the crosscut saw was how you got it before the chainsaw. Two men with a sharp crosscut could fell a 20-inch oak in 15 minutes. The chainsaw arrived on American farms in the late 1940s, and the crosscut saw was obsolete within a decade. No tool in farming history was replaced as fast or as completely, and this next one is the most impressive piece of engineering most people have never heard of. Number 8, hay fork and trolley. A steel track bolted along the peak of the barn roof, running the full length of the building. A wheeled trolley rode that track. Below it hung a set of iron hay forks, either harpoon-style prongs or a grapple that opened and closed like a claw. A wagon of loose hay was driven under the barn's gable overhang. The forks were lowered and set into the hay. A horse hitched to a rope outside the barn pulled the draft line, hoisting up to half a ton of loose hay to the peak of the barn in a single lift. When the load reached the trolley, it locked into the carrier and slid along the track into the loft. A man standing in the mow pulled a trip rope, the forks released, and the hay dropped exactly where he wanted it. Then the trolley was pulled back to the front, the forks descended, and the whole cycle started again. This system could fill a 30-foot barn loft in an afternoon. Over 600 patents were issued for hay fork designs between 1854 and the end of the loose hay era. The trolley system was so important that it actually determined how barns were built. The width of a hay barn was limited by how far one trolley track could distribute hay, typically 24 to 34 feet. The tool shaped the building. Number 7, hog scraper. A bell-shaped or disc-shaped steel tool, cupped slightly on one side with a handle on the other. After a hog was slaughtered and scalded in boiling water, a man pressed the scraper flat against the carcass and pushed it along the skin. The hot water loosened the hair, and the scraper removed it in sheets. The hog had to be scraped clean before butchering could begin. Every farm that raised hogs owned a set of scrapers, and every fall when the weather turned cold, they came out. Home butchering disappeared as commercial slaughterhouses scaled up. The scraper went with it. Number 6, cant hook. A hardwood handle about 4 feet long with a hinged steel hook near the end. The hook swung freely on a pivot and bit into a log when you rolled it. Cant hooks were how a farmer moved logs that were too heavy to lift. You set the hook, levered the handle, and the log rolled. Every farm that cut its own timber, split its own firewood, or cleared its own land owned a cant hook. It was the simplest tool on the farm and one of the most dangerous because a rolling log doesn't stop when you let go. Number 5, corn sheller. A hand-cranked cast iron machine bolted to a bench or a post. You fed an ear of dried corn into the hopper, turned the crank, and a set of teeth stripped the kernels from the cob. The kernels fell into a bucket below. The cob came out the side. A man could shell a bushel of corn in about 10 minutes, one ear at a time. The corn sheller was the bridge between the field and the feed bin. Without it, a farmer stripped kernels by hand, rubbing 2 ears together until his palms bled. The mechanical sheller was a mercy, and the electric sheller that replaced it was faster but never sat in the same spot in the barn. Number 4, hay knife. A 3-foot steel blade, sometimes straight, sometimes serrated like a bread knife with a T-handle on top. You drove it straight down into a stack of compressed hay to cut a feeding portion. Loose hay in a mow packs down under its own weight until it's almost solid. You can't pull it apart with a pitchfork. The hay knife cut through the compressed mass the way a bread knife cuts through a loaf. Most people who see one for the first time think it's a weapon from a horror film. It was a feeding tool, used every morning and every evening, all winter long. Number 3, hand corn planter. the jabber planter, a spring-loaded metal tube with a pointed bottom and two hinged handles at the top. You squeeze the handles open, jab the point into the ground, and release. The spring closed the handles, the point opened underground, dropped two kernels of corn into the hole, and the soil closed over them as you pulled the tool out. One jab, two seeds, one hole. A man could plant an acre of corn in a day, walk in the rows, jabbing every step. Horse-drawn planters and then tractor-mounted planters replaced it entirely by the 1960s. The hand planter was the last time a farmer touched every seed he put in the ground. Number 2, fanning mill, a hand-cranked wooden machine about the size of a writing desk. You poured threshed grain into a hopper at the top. Inside, a set of graduated screens sorted the grain by size, while a hand-cranked fan blew air across the falling seeds. The air carried away the chaff, the dust, the broken kernels, and the weed seeds. Clean grain fell through the bottom screen into a collection bin. Dirty grain stayed on top. The fanning mill was the last step between harvest and storage, and without it, a farmer's grain bin would be full of trash that ruined the crop. Every farm had one, usually sitting in the same corner of the barn for 40 years. The combine harvester made it obsolete by doing the threshing, cleaning, and separating all at once in the field. Number 1, cream separator, a hand-cranked centrifuge that stood about 4 feet tall with a large stainless steel bowl on top and two spouts coming off the sides. You poured fresh whole milk into the bowl and turned the crank. Inside, a stack of thin conical steel discs spun at 6,000 to 8,000 revolutions per minute through a gear system that multiplied your cranking speed by more than 100 times. The centrifugal force pushed the heavier skim milk to the outer edges of the discs and out one spout. The lighter cream rose to the center and came out the other. The cream separator was the most mechanically complex tool on any American farm. The disc assembly alone contained dozens of precision machined steel cones stacked fractions of an inch apart. Cleaning it after every use meant disassembling the entire stack, washing every disc by hand, and reassembling them in order. The separator turned morning, milking into butter, cream for coffee, cream for selling, and skim milk for the hogs, all before breakfast. Gustave de Laval patented the first centrifugal separator in 1878. By the 1950s, hand-crank separators were on nearly every dairy farm in America. By the 1960s, bulk milk tanks and commercial creamery pickups made them unnecessary. The most sophisticated hand-powered machine most farm families ever owned became the heaviest doorstop in the barn. In the 1950s, a farmer could walk into his barn and put his hands on every tool he needed to feed his family for a year. He didn't call anyone, he didn't order anything. He picked up the tool, did the work, and put it back. Every one of these 15 tools was replaced by something faster, and not one of them was replaced by something a man could fix with his own hands. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and watch the next video above.